the record progress. There we go. So that was an unrecorded introduction. So I'll just say a little bit about Paul. He is a professor of economics, psychology, and management at Claremont Graduate University, and one of the most cited scientists with over 200 published papers and more than 20,000 citations to his research. And it's taken you from the Pentagon to Fortune 50 boardrooms. And for those of you who've read the Trust Factor to the rainforests of Papua New Guinea, he's written a number of books: Trust Factor, The Science of Creating High-Performance Companies, and The Moral Molecule, and How Trust Works. And he's also a four-time tech entrepreneur, and his current company, which we'll be looking at the technology today, called Immersion Neuroscience, is a platform that allows anyone to measure what the brain loves in real time to improve outcomes. So we're super excited. Thank you for joining us. And Claire's going to be in conversation with Paul. And as I say, please, questions in the chat, and feel free to share your wisdom. So very warm welcome to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Too much of an intro, but so lower the expectations, people.
It's early morning. Paul, Kevin's talked about how inspired he's been, and likewise, you know, the last 15 years of my life have been imbued in studying as best I can the neuroscience from the perspective of an embodiment practitioner. I'm an ex-dancer, as you know. Oxytocin and your work is playing a big part in the Institute today, because tomorrow we have a graduation ceremony. And for some of the people that are here that are graduates will know what that ceremony feels like. And it's a big day. It's people have put a lot of work in, and they've just today received feedback. And I'm getting emails saying, oh, you know, I teared up when I got the feedback to say that I'd graduated in coaching with physical intelligence. And, you know, as someone that gives feedback, I always try to be extremely honest and direct and very supportive, and lots of suggestions about what we're doing and where next. So lots of oxytocin around in the Institute, and that is one of the chemicals that we're here to talk about. And I'm just wondering, actually, Paul, we do want to talk about oxytocin. We want to talk about immersion, but would you, I mean, what's a day in the life of Paul Zak at the moment? What do you sort of spend your time doing? What's your day ahead look like? Do you go into the lab? What are you working on at the moment? What's it look like?
Oh, how nice. Thank you, Claire. And what a pleasure to spend time with all of you. Really kind of wear three hats. One is in the lab, where we're continuing to look at the neuroscience of extraordinary experiences, both for humans and for organizations. That is, how do you create extraordinary experiences that are not only valuable to that customer or client, but are potentially transformative. And so I think that's really the world that we want to live in, where we have such great experiences that our life changes for the better, maybe just a little bit. And that generates high customer lifetime value. That's win for the customer, win for the organization. And then what we've shown recently is, you know, win for society as a whole. So when we have these peak immersion experiences, these highly valuable experiences, we are training our brains to be more present and more emotionally open, and therefore we're better parents, we're better spouses, we're better friends. And so I think there's really a sacred duty here to for all of us to help create transformative experiences for those around us, whether they're friends or clients. So that's the first, is continue to push that boundary and understand that we've got to lead on the science and not follow the science. And then the second is really getting that word out to organizations that use our software every day. So the kind of innovation that we made, that both you and Kevin sort of suggested, but I'll be, you know, more concrete, is we want to get this work out of the lab. And so 6 years ago, create a software company so that anybody can measure what their brain loves in real time and psychological safety, and then objectively assess, am I creating transformative experiences? Am I actually improving lives by the product or service I offer? And so that involves software development and managing teams and doing data science. And then the third is the thing I love the most, which is being on the road, talking to people like you all, and sharing this information so that more people can learn about it and benefit from it.
That's a really wonderful answer. When we met to chat about this, one of the things that we hit upon immediately was this definition of stress. And you talked about it with great passion. And I think we should just get that out there now, because it kind of sets the tone for the app and what you're trying to do, I think, with immersion. And, you know, you talked about how chronic, how not all stress is bad stress. In fact, stress is good. And it's an indication of how we thrive. Do you want to just frame that a little bit for us in terms of how we perceive stress and how we perceive thriving?
Great question again, Claire. So let me do just a little bit of backstory on this. So I'm using the word immersion in a technical sense to identify a data stream from the brain that involves multiple neurologic signals that, by all accounts, is the brain's valuation network for social and emotional experiences. In other words, I can actually look at the rate of neural firing and then use that to assess how much this person values the experience they're currently in. And this is work we did with funding from the U.S. National Institutes of Health and the Department of Defense and other agencies, and millions of dollars of research and published science. So when we look at this valuation network for social emotional experiences, it's metabolically costly. Your brain's investing processing power, calories, into saying, holy crap, I love this experience. I'm really going to get a lot of value out of it. And to do that, I've actually got to expend metabolic energy. And so it's not like we're trying to avoid stress. We're trying to channel stress or physiologic arousal. We're trying to channel that arousal towards those experiences that give us the most value. And so what we find in the lab and in the 50,000 plus brains we've measured is that when stress or physiological arousal is very high, that network is impeded. That network for valuing experience is impeded. So if I haven't eaten in 24 hours, if I haven't slept, all right, I'm kind of in survival mode and I'm burning my metabolic bandwidth on how do I get a meal or how do I find a place to sleep. So I got back from a meeting in New Orleans yesterday, and flight delays, weather, and so I try to sleep on the plane, try to I'm eating snacks for dinner, and so you're not at your best because you're just kind of in survival mode. So it turned out that moderate stress actually improves memory performance, enjoyment of experiences, and so what we want to do is create challenges for individuals so that they have that challenge stress. Mm-hmm. And stress says, hey, this is important. I'm going to spend a bunch of metabolic energy. So that challenge stress is very engaging. It's why we play sports and work out and for that matter, cry at movies, right? Why would you do that? Or at a sad song, it's physiologically stressful. So what we want to do from a kind of a coaching or even a personal use perspective is find those challenges where they're difficult but achievable, and then learn to value those challenges and get better at whatever we're doing. And that helps, again, build our capacity, our resilience. So it's not avoiding stress. And I think we've been, I don't know, sold by the health stress industries that just to avoid stress. So if we don't avoid stress, we'll just wrap Kevin up in bubble wrap, stick him on the couch, and then never talk to him and have zero stress. He'll also die, but you have no stress. So really, I think I've been on this rampage that we want challenge stress. We want to actually find those things that we're investing in. So just to finish that thought, Claire, and I'm almost done. What we see in patients who suffer from depression, anxiety disorders, and actually a whole host of medical disorders is social withdrawal. They're pulling back from life. Right? They have so much physiologic stress from their disorder, they don't have the energy to actually engage socially, emotionally. So that's also not healthy, right? So when we see that social withdrawal, then we say, oh, this person is not thriving. So we think of adult measures of thriving as being fully engaged in life, going out to happy hour with your friends, watching a movie, taking a hike with your dog, right? All those things are physiologically stressful, and we need to keep doing them to be physically and emotionally healthy.
I love that so much. And the sort of aspects of keeping calm and somehow keeping the lid on on fired up energy is so much not what physical intelligence is about, and likewise in your world. And so it's really, isn't it, about getting the adrenals to be robust and to get the other chemistry that joins robust adrenals to be, you know, flowing, to be able to be aroused and then to recover. And in fact, that one gives the other more breadth. So you get, you know, you get into a game, you get into life, and your adrenals provide the cortisol and adrenaline to do that optimally. And then, hey, what do you know? You recover better. So you flood the counteracting system. And that, having great adrenals like that, balances the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. You've got enough on tap, and it all, those things draw together. Now, just in case you're wondering where this is going, everybody, we've got I want to just sort of chart you through Paul's 3 books, just so you know what to go, because I'm going to recommend you buy all 3, and if you haven't read them, just read them. If you're a chemistry lover, if you're an oxytocin lover, dopamine, serotonin are all mentioned, testosterone mentioned, because it's all part of how we live a life, and how we live a life communally together, and how we live a life where there is competition as well. So those things are important. And then we'll move on to the technology that Paul has created and I've been using, and we're going to encourage you to use it. You'll get a QR code for Best Tuesday Ever. It's a wonderful app, and talk about some other applications of the technology. So that's where we're going to go. So Paul, I'm going to flag up each of your books now, and then maybe if I've left out anything, you know, you could just chip in, and we complete the sort of the journey that you've been on. And it's much bigger than this journey, but the first, is this your first book? This first book is The Moral Molecule. Is that right? Can you see that
Correct.
up there?
Yep.
With all my post-it notes? And for those of you that are learning with us here about oxytocin, or you're just interested in it, this is just a brilliantly written story about the chemicals, with lots of anecdotes and, you know, evocative stories of you know, Paul seeing, meeting and working with someone that has that loneliness factor and just isn't communicating, and seeing the impact of that, and seeing the impact of that, and working with people who are, you know, thriving, and having those incredible relationships, and goes from the individual to how we operate in groups to how we operate as a big society. So that's the first one, and that was 2012. Then this goes to organization. So all of you who are coaching and facilitating in business, you have to read this. Whenever we quote your work, Paul, and give the, you know, what's great is that there's so much depth here of the research, taking bloods, you know, reporting on taking blood samples and measuring oxytocin levels in people from all over the world, you know, hundreds and thousands of samples. This is really good science. And then the gift to us in our community is that Paul has given us a series of leadership behaviors that create high oxytocin organizations. And where there's high trust, high oxytocin, there is high purpose. And you will read and be astonished at the results of that. The 55% increase in productivity. I mean, incredible things. So you have to read this book. I'm not even saying it would be nice if you did. You have to if you're working in organizations. And so that's the second book. That was 2017, right? And then here's the third one. I hope you've got a little bit in the bank account to go for this. You're going to get the app for free. So, you know, I'm doing a good sales job, aren't I now? I'm just sort of quite liking this myself, but it's all from a place of passion. But here is the book on immersion, which Paul has already introduced as a topic. And how we evaluate how involved in things that we are emotionally. And I love the application of immersion to marketing. You know, how do we sell? How do we communicate about the things that we think are passionate, in order to we think are great and we're passionate about, in order to let others enjoy them too. So there's lots in that trilogy. Paul, what would you add to that resume of the book aspect, the book aspect of your life?
Yeah, well, always trying to be practical. So I would say, my work is in behavioral neuroscience. I'm trying to understand what the humans are doing, because if you ask people, they have just sort of a rough idea. So if I say, well, I talked to Kevin and he likes chocolate ice cream and I like vanilla, why? I don't know, it just does, right? So I think by developing knowledge and tools in neuroscience, we can get to the source of behavior and therefore help guide that behavior. First of all, have self-insights into our own behavior, but also recognize what I think is, I call the dirty secret of neuroscience, Claire, which is if we run an experiment and measure brain activity in some way on 50 people doing the same thing, we'll see that data line up into 3, 4, 5 different patterns of brain activity across those people. So they're doing the same task of different brain activity. And so when you look in neuroscience studies, we average things, but those averages are actually not as interesting as the spread around those averages. So the punchline here is that everybody's weird. And we're weird for reasons that we're not consciously aware of, we ourselves and other people. And so we should expect others to be inconsistent. Again, because you're tired, you're hungry, you haven't slept, um, I don't know, all kinds of things. The weather's funny, all that is affecting the way our brain's processing information, but most of that is unconscious. And so we'll see variations of behavior. I don't want to say good or bad, but variations that the person doesn't even know. They're just living through life. So I've worked a lot with psychiatric patients and people with brain injury, and you get bonked on the brain in the right way, and your whole personality changes. And so just imagine us, we're getting bonked by changes in neurochemicals all the time that we're not aware of. So I think the first thing is just really accepting people for how they are, including that we're going to be odd, and the people around us may go, "Hey, what's wrong with you today?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I feel great." Like, "Oh, you're cranky or you're happy." So one thing I've done, Claire, just as an example, is
Mhm.
to use an adjective when I interact with people. So let's say I'm meeting Kevin for the first time, and I'll say, "Hey, Kevin, very nice to meet you. Gosh, you look happy, sad, worried." Or I put an adjective in, and then it opens up that discussion that allows us to have a much deeper connection quickly. It's easier when you know someone. Meeting on the first time can be a little odd sometimes, but for people you work with, why don't we just say, "Hi, how are you? Good, how are you?" And move on. Like, "Hi, you look," add an adjective, right? And then all of a sudden we have this a chance for a real social connection that may only last 60 seconds, but it's a real human scale emotional connection that just says, "Hey, I actually care about you. I care about how you're doing." And if you're leading people, I find it really valuable. My view is I'd rather avoid presentism, or if I see people coming in the office or the lab and they look tired or whatever, I'm like, "Are you okay? Like, what's going on?" "Oh, my dog died," or "My kid is sick." I'm like, "Hey, if your projects are going fine, your group's fine, like go home. Don't show up because you're not going
Mhm.
to be useful to us at all. I'd rather have you go home, rest, resolve that issue, and then come back tomorrow on full energy." So I think that's a caring way to keep particularly high performers working at their best.
That's wonderful. I'm just pulling out a few things from a couple of your books, and this one from the moral molecule. What we're talking about here is really what drives societies forward positively. It's a big thing we're talking about here. We're talking about the science behind why, if someone has an oxytocin boost, you've done a lot of testing on the ultimatum game, which is where people, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I've never done this bit of science, but the ultimatum game is where you try to get people to give more generous offers. You ask them, is that right, Paul? Can you explain that game?
Yeah, it's just a way to look at to quantify a theory of mind and whether you're more pro-social. So it's a simple task in which we recruit people. We never lie to them or deceive them in any way. I'm 100% against ever running an experiment with deception. Don't need to deceive people. I'm interested in decision making. I don't want to confuse you. So the task is you randomly match with someone in the room you can't see or talk to, but it's a real person. Um, you're randomized to be decision maker one or two. Decision maker one has some amount of money, say $10. And after lots of instruction and examples, they're prompted by computer to say, prompted by computer to offer some split of that money to person two. Person two gets a message by computer saying, hey, person one offered you this amount of split. If you accept that split, you both get the money. If you don't, if you reject it, you both get zero. So if you think about that task for a minute, it requires that you put yourself as decision maker one into decision makers two's shoes, what we call that theory of mind. Like, oh, if I was guy two, would I accept $1 out of 10? If I know what the total pie is, would I accept $2? Right. And so what we found is that if we give you synthetic oxytocin or give you a stimulus like a video that induces your brain to make oxytocin, that people will actually offer more money. Even when we ask them, like, what's the minimum you think you need to be offered, you need to offer to get this accepted? They'll actually offer more than the minimum. Like, this guy's great. So you can think of this experiment as showing that oxytocin kind of dissolves those barriers between people who seem to be strangers. So I matched with Kevin in the lab, and I'm like, Kevin, he's like my brother. I'll give him a bunch of money. Who cares? Right? As opposed to, oh, he's someone I should be afraid of or someone that I'm not sure of. So I think that's valuable. And you said something very important, Claire, which is, the brain works on changes, not levels. And so this oxytocin release is very rapid, but also disappears rapidly. And so you really want to think about creating opportunities for these peak immersion experiences that induce the release of oxytocin, but I don't want to be up here all the time. And this is why a lot of the research that we pioneered, other people have done too, which we infuse synthetic oxytocin into the brain via the nose. Well, I'm sledgehammering you, and that stays on for about 3 hours. Well, that's not adaptive. I don't want to be drugging people because now I might run into, I'm going to pick on someone's name here. I might run into Frederick, clearly a sketchy guy. I don't want to be giving away stuff to Frederick, right? He could hurt me. So the brain's own system is very surgical. It's like, oh, there's Kevin. He's a great dude. Release oxytocin. And I see Frederick, you're fine, I'm sure. And I see Frederick, now I have a different response, maybe a fear response, right? Where I release things like cortisol, epinephrine, and I go, oh yeah, I want to actually be really careful around Frederick because I don't know him and he's a big guy and I don't know, he's not smiling or something. Who knows? It's all unconscious, right? This is not, you can't consciously control this.
Yeah. Yes. And so, the increase in oxytocin adaptively is increases generosity. So
yeah, or
that's
pro-social
the big
behaviors more generally, right?
Pro-social behavior generally. And dancing as well. I believe in one of the experiments, you got people to dance for a couple of hours, which of course interests me as a dancer. So a couple of hours, and was it 11% increase in oxytocin? And then you got people to map out where in a room they would have spent their time. Where would they see themselves in a social environment? And as their oxytocin increased, they marked themselves nearer the center. Is that correct, Paul? I just thought it was
exactly right.
It's
You
just
just feel,
beautiful.
again, it's like my brother Kevin. I just feel close to him. I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, this is wonderful. And if you think about, we'll go on to talk about psychological safety now, but if you think about the repercussions of this in a very diverse world and an increasingly global world where we need to transcend differences, and when we do react because we think someone is different to us and we can't help some of that we're absolutely able to be aware of it and actually consciously deliver ourselves some oxytocin. So although there's lots that's happening unconsciously, I guess my interest in physical intelligence is, well, what can we do consciously? Where can we get in the driving seat of this? So what's your response to that, Paul, in terms of conscious oxytocin?
Yeah, I'm going to change the question a little bit to give a little more precision. So I think the first takeaway is, our neuroanatomy is really set up to pick up social signals very much more effectively than other mammals. And so it's very natural for us to get together in groups, to work together. It's not, disabuse yourself of this sort of Marxian notion that it's evil to exploit humans. No, we like getting together, right? It's fun. I just came back from this meeting with 12,000 people. I had a ball, hugged people, took pictures, it was just like, it was, you guys know this, right? It's not weird at all. So people working together who are initially strangers, it's exactly what our brains are set up for. So that's awesome. The second is we can't cause our own brains to release oxytocin. We can just give that gift to others, right? So one thing that I know Claire and Kevin know famously did on a TED Talk about 10 years ago was hug a stranger. And we've shown that touch releases oxytocin. So there's a brain hack, right? So when I meet people, I say, oh, I don't shake hands, I hug people. And people go, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, who do you hug? You hug people you like, your friends, your family. So that's a brain hack that I know induces oxytocin release to other people. I pre-announce because once in a while people who are a little bit nervous and they'd rather not hug, which is fine. And so now I'm hacking their brain. Now they hug me back, they're gonna reciprocate, right? Now I get oxytocin release from them. So it's a gift you have to give to somebody else. But all the stuff you do, Claire, which is great, physical movement, as you said, dance, walking together. I love the
Yeah.
walking daily huddle. It's a great way to get oxygen to your brain, right? Because you're moving around, not sitting on your butt, and it stimulates that joint release of oxytocin and other neurochemicals that help us not only cognitively but also emotionally understand where people are coming from, right?
Mm.
Why does I'll go back to Frederick, who was sweetheart. Why does Frederick care so much about this thing? Oh, well, let's walk and talk about that, right? I could sit down and just ask you, but in that going through nature, doing something together, those ideas kind of bubble up. Yeah, a little bit of alcohol will do that as well. So more than 3 drinks, they get bad behavior. So, light alcohol, anything that's warm, sitting by the beach, sitting in a hot tub, all that is a great way to relax that balance between being um, um, vigilant to look for threats in your environment and being open to connecting to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'd love to do some research on this, but I think, imagining scenarios, self hugs, those kind of things in my reading of my own body, and in ways that I guess I'm experimenting with and we're experimenting with, the parasympathetic activity puts me in a state where just imagining contact, I think, actually gets that home reaction going. So you might not think that's genuinely what's happening. What are your thoughts on powerful visualizations of being together? We did a lot of it during COVID. What are the thoughts about that?
I think very testable. You have the
Yeah,
technology to test it. So,
yeah,
um, we haven't run that in the laboratory because it's difficult to control that response
yeah,
across a large group of people. But I think testing it on yourself, if it works, keep doing it.
yeah, yeah. So I think there's some really fantastic questions in the chat. Paul, do you want to just have a look? There's one here from one here from Michelle. Does being online impact the possible oxytocin releases when connecting with others? I mean, that's a really good question. Does it transmit through this? What do you think?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Great question. So we actually did research on this pre-COVID, in which we looked at the release of oxytocin and related neurochemicals while people interacted in person, online with video, like we're doing now, and online with just text. And we saw the gradient you would expect, which is in person, the highest average oxytocin release. Online, we see between 50 and 80% of oxytocin release. And then below 50%, 40, 50% for actually text messages like tweeting. So let's just talk about that for a second. I'm tweeting out to my people, and I'm still getting oxytocin release as if I'm hanging out with them in person. So it just tells us how acutely we are aware of those social cues we are, which is amazing. For the online video conference, that effect scales with the connection you have with someone. So we ran an experiment for South Korean TV, a TV replication of that experiment. And this is where we're doing blood draws, right? So
Yeah.
we didn't have the technology we have today to get real-time measures. And one of that was one of the young assistant producers, and he had like 150% oxytocin release just sending messages, in this case on Facebook. And so you look at that data and go, okay, well, who are you interacting with? Oh, I just got engaged. That was my fiance. I'm out of the country for like a week. Well, of course, right? So again, think of oxytocin release and more generally immersion as indexing the value of that experience you're having. So if I'm having an experience with my loved one, of course, different experience than just talking to random people I work with. So I think the actionable approach here is, thoughtfully building relationships with people we work with is a great way to facilitate greater teamwork, greater enjoyment at work, really getting satisfied, having these people around us that really care about you, that have your back. I think that's really important. It's natural.
Yeah. All right. I know that there are other questions in the chat. We'll maybe come back to those because I'd like to now to move on and talk about the technology itself, the immersion technology. And then I'm going to flag up one of my readouts so you can see what the app looks like. We'll post the QR code in the chat shortly. Yeah, so actually there are 3 apps, aren't there, Paul? Is that correct? So just
There
to
are
at
3
least
apps, yeah.
just take us through the nuts and bolts of this immersion technology and tips on, well, yes, how's it being used? That'd be great.
Right. So let's just define it first. So immersion, again, is this neurologic state. It's neuroelectrical activity. Because I'm in the prediction world and not the feeling world, we found that when we take signals from the cranial nerves, I think of this as the brain's output file. Those are nice network effects. We're at the level of the brain using EEG or fMRI. Those are really disaggregated signals. That's hard to get the network effects. So we're pulling signals from the cranial nerves that capture the central brain activity, that tell us second by second the value your brain assigns to that experience. The key drivers for that are dopamine binding to prefrontal cortex, which is associated with intentional response. So this won't be a great experience if I'm distracted looking over here, but if I'm actually paying attention to you, that's kind of table stakes. I've got to be present. The second is the release of oxytocin. That's that emotional resonance of the experience. Is it creating emotional value for me? And so the emotions are how we tag value in the brain. So dopamine and oxytocin have a very interesting, complicated interaction that induce electrical activity that we can pick up in these cranial nerves. These luckily pass through the heart, or 2 of them pass through the heart. And so I can use a standard heart rate sensor or smartwatch. And over many years, we wrote code that lets us infer brain activity from these very subtle acceleration, deceleration of the heart. So that's the first. And so, yeah, 3 products. One for marketing, for recorded content. Most marketing and advertising fails. And so our first product 6 years ago was a way to just email out content and like a QR code to download the free app. If you've got a supported smartwatch, then advertisers can use this to improve the content that they're creating. Before you just throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it works, measure, see if the brain cares about it. I'm going to use one bad word, Claire. One of our early subscribers called immersion the give a shit measure. Like, yeah, it's kind of true. Like, do I actually give a shit about this ad I'm seeing on YouTube? And how do I increase it? The second, we have a product that measures live experiences. This includes corporate training, meetings like this, shopping experiences. And then last July released version 1 of our app for emotional fitness, which is long-term data collection, all day, days, weeks, months, that give people goals for social emotional interaction, a ring to close every day so that they sustain their emotional fitness. Yeah, there's our website, getimmersion.com. Thanks for sharing this, Claire. That's very nice of you. Or Kevin, whoever's sharing it. So Known is our recorded experience product. And these are all just software as a service. So yeah, you download it, it's on your desktop, you collect the data, it's private. We never see it unless you want to share it with us. And then, Lively is our brand for live experiences, surprisingly. And our emotional fitness app, which is really to build up our emotional wellness, is called Tuesday. And it's available in the App Store. Version 1 is for the iPhone only, and version 2 will be iPhone and Android, and that's coming out in September. We haven't announced it yet, but you guys get the news first.
That's great. That's great that that's happening. So dopamine, oxytocin passing through the heart, measured through a receptor that you wear. I do it through my Whoop, but there are cheaper versions of simple technology that you wear. And maybe, Paul, you could just let us know or put in the chat the one that you use. Um, And before, so these three apps, app number one, if you've made a, promo video of yourself or a few little clips of something, you could apply it to that known app and see, whether it's hitting the marks, whether the rhythm of it is appealing, whether it draws people in, whether you're staying too long on one thing and people are getting bored. You could measure that. Isn't that amazing? And the second one, I was talking to someone who has used the live experience, the second app that you talked about, the second application of technology. And imagine being in a training room. So how many of you here do leadership development work, or you're in front of a room and you'd like to know how engaged they are, right? You're doing some experiences. You could invite Paul, you could get him to, to sort of bring some equipment, or I'm not sure exactly the mechanics of it, but you could actually come out of that training day or training 3 days, or leadership development activity or an embodied session, and find out how people have reacted. I just think that is so amazingly cool.
Yeah.
And
so if I can just jump in, Accenture's been using our technology, and very nicely let me put a bunch of their data in the immersion book to measure the $1 billion they spend annually to upskill their employees. Accenture's about a $15 billion revenue company, and they spend $1 billion training their employees. Like, they're really serious about retention and creating value, both for their clients, but also for those employees. So employees are developing professionally. And they have found, using our technology, that people cannot, in a training, cannot stay immersed neurologically for more than 20 minutes without a break. So they've broken their training down into 20-minute segments. And that doesn't mean a physical break. It means there's a break in what you're doing. So they may have someone, a facilitator, present for no more than 20 minutes and then move to, say, table work for 20 minutes and then move to watch a video and then discuss it, right? And again, because immersion is metabolically costly, they've actually put longer breaks in their training, right? And this is, counter to the way we teach kids, like, well, we've trained ourselves to sit on our butts for 8 hours a day. It just doesn't mean our brains work optimally at that speed. So I think, think of it shorter and more intensive, longer breaks, I think are really effective. I'm happy to take the question from Michelle if I can. Claire, am I allowed?
And then I'll show you what the Tuesday app, that's the third app, which we can all use like today. We don't even have to wait till next Tuesday. We can use it from today. Michelle, go for your question.
I'm happy to wait for you to finish your presenting all the different apps, if that's helpful. I'm happy to wait.
No, go for it now. You're on. Give us your question. We may not answer it in full if it's a lengthy.
It's not. I don't know if it's lengthy, but I'm just. Wonderful presentation. Thank you, everybody, for this. It's been brilliant. I'm just interested to know the potential unintended consequences. I think there's so much powerful work that can be done with this, but you think about social media apps and they're trying to get people to concentrate for longer on apps, ads, and things like that, you causing dopamine spikes and huge issues with people's dopamine levels. I'm just interested, have you thought about the unintended consequences of giving this to marketing professionals? I don't know if this is an appropriate question for now. If you want to answer later, that's also fine.
We're going to communicate. My view is we should communicate effectively. The reason I wrote the book is so that everyone's aware of what these tools are and you can say no. So there's a whole chapter on the ethics of trying to influence people in the immersion book, and I'm very serious about that. My first book had the word moral in it, so I'm totally aware of it, but you're going to get messaged. So if I want to create a message for you, why should it be a crappy message? Or we have a new subscriber that's a very high-end restaurant chain in Canada. So, $200 dinner. They really want to create a great experience for you, right? And so I'm down with that. Let's create a great experience, right? I don't want to the food may be fabulous, but if the service isn't great, it's not going to be a great experience. And so I think as long as we're aware and we're not coerced in any way, we're not rushed, then it's ethical to communicate as well as possible. For the Tuesday app for emotional fitness, so for the other apps, you're consenting. It's on your phone. You have to push yes. Every time you use it, you have to push yes. So you have to agree that you're going to let your anonymized data be sent to whoever's measuring it. For the Tuesday app, you own that data. It's yours, right? Because it's about your own emotional state. Your employer might ask you or give you to an employee benefit. They may measure that to make sure they're creating a safe and effective workplace, psychologically safe workplace where people flourish, but they're not going to see your individual data. So I don't think there's any ethical issues. But yeah, thanks for that question, Michelle.
Yeah. All right. So I want to just share a slide now and just tell you this little story, and then we can you can sort of see what's some practical sort of PI work around this app. So when I first started using this app, what you get is this immersion score at the top. And if I was to scroll sideways, I'd also get psychological safety. So immersion is the green line. Sorry, psychological safety is the green line and immersion is the blue line, as you can see there. And I was in Dubai and it was 11 o'clock at night and I'd done a huge piece of work that day and it kept playing over my mind. So I'd sort of tried to go to sleep and then I was still awake, and I just turned my Tuesday app on and got it to start measuring where I was. So I was at, I was sort of hovering around 20 to 50 mark on the immersion. And I wasn't feeling very psychologically safe, was I? I was obviously sort of evaluating, hadn't had the feedback yet. I was evaluating, how good was it? Did it go well? Did it do everything we wanted to do? And so I got up and I thought, well, I wonder what I just got experimental, and I wonder what I do. And this was very early days of me having the app. It must have been the sort of third or fourth time that I'd switched it on. And I just decided that I would do, number one is one of our techniques that basically stretches and opens the heart tissue, the chest, and it's exactly, and some of you know it already, but it is the Kate Winslet, and it is simply, exactly what you do. You remember Kate Winslet in her character in the Titanic on the front of the boat, the ship, and just really stretching in, and feel free to do one with me, but really stretching in and breathing into that whole chest area started that upward movement. And then I tried, and then I sort of thought, okay, so if we're doing psychological safety here, and this is, there's just me in this hotel room, how there's no danger, how can I do this? So I just started to physiologically tell myself I was safe. And so I just said the word safe. Safe. And I said it lots of times. And I was watching this just go up. I was thinking, wow, that's really cool. And I could feel the change in my body. And when we speak the language, we're activating the neural circuitry. It's going right through our bodies and brains. We're no separation there. We're speaking it, we're feeling it. The neurophysiology is changing. And then I thought, well, what if I just say, happy? And that felt good as well. And it's sort of going up a little bit higher. And then I thought, to hell with it. I'm just gonna go for joy. So I raised my voice, and I feel a little bit silly being the only one doing this, but I just went joyful. And, and that journey, and I just repeat it. And I still have that, repeat that a number of times. And that got my scores up. And I like to be a high scoring person. So I like to know I can, if I'm not feeling psychologically safe, I can get there. And so with psychological safety, I'm right in thinking that this is measuring the vagal activity and, chemistry like acetylcholine and DHEA, these kind of things for the psychological safety. And the immersion is the oxytocin dopamine frequency. So that's my story. And actually, since then, which was way back, gosh, I think that was January, I started using it. Since then, I've just adopted a few new things and slightly extended what I do in my morning practice. I'm doing definitely doing this 5-5 breathing every morning for at least 10 minutes. And I do other really sort of solid yoga practice. And I've noticed, and maybe it's just because I'm working on it through the app, but the app's been, that feedback means that actually my scores have gone way higher over the rule. And I emailed Paul the other day. I said, my scores are really high. Have you changed the algorithm, or something changed in the app? And he said, no, 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 just, you know, live the life. It just means it means that, I don't know, something about the permission to really thrive and be, you know, we've got a lot on and we're really busy and sometimes I'm really tired, but just the permission to really be involved and not worry about what that's doing as a stress factor. You'd think I would know after all these years, but I just want to let you know that the app and having that mirrored back and the experimenting with it that I did has actually, you know, boosted a physiology that was already pretty good, but it's just really, really given a mirror. And I really like it. And I really encourage you to use it. And there's a share factor. There's a share factor. So I'm wondering if, you know, if those of you that think you might like to start experimenting with this, we could create a shared community. You could contact me afterwards and say, yep, I've got the app, I've got the gear. And I'd like to be, you know, we'd like to share it. So Paul, would you mind telling us a bit about, well, any responses to that, first of all, my story, and then how can we use the share, you know, what's the share facility about?
So I love that story so much. And for the group, you guys know Claire's extraordinary. And so, you know, those super high scores are, you know, not achievable by everybody. And so she's kind of optimized her ability to not only connect to herself, but to connect to others. So we do find that people like Claire who are empathic and agreeable just have bigger scores. Their brains are just more wired for social connection. And so that you're able to do this yourself, Claire, is so awesome. Like I just want to bring you to my lab and study you for a week. So you're amazing. Yeah. So the reason we put in this share focus is, as you guys know, this work on network effects socially, right? So if you tend to be around people who are overweight or who exercise, you tend to pick up those traits. So same thing with our emotional fitness. When we're around people who build us up, who are emotionally healthy. Again, we all have down days for sure. So we built an ability in the app to add 5 friends so that you can actually both see how they're doing, but also see how you're doing relative to them. And you can anonymously share a thumbs up, a heart, something to help support those individuals. And so I think that's really important that we learn how to socially, emotionally regulate ourselves. And so, yeah, the app has the ability to invite up to 5 people, and then you can again, you're not going to see their data directly, but you'll see how they're doing. They're having a good day or a bad day, and you know what, for people you care about, the most important thing is to support them, right? So it just gives you a little reminder to reach out to whoever. But I've been picking on Frederick all day. Dear Frederick is having a bad day, so I'm going to send him a little thumbs up. Hey, just thinking about you, dude. And sometimes that's enough. So you're kind of in a low mood and like, oh yeah, someone actually is happy I'm on the planet. How nice is that?
So I guess that's how it applies, you know, to coaching. I mean, you could have an in situ situation where together you might be looking at various things that you're coaching on, that you could be doing, and seeing the effect live as you're sitting with a coachee. Let's have a quick look at the impact of that on your oxytocin, dopamine levels and your psychological safety. So I guess that's one application for coaching within session. And then I guess you can track, if you had 5 coachees and you wanted them to use the app, you could be the one, they could be your sharing community. Is that correct? If I got the right end of the stick there, Paul, in terms of how coaches could use this?
I would say yes, and so what we see coaches do is we have an enterprise platform that will suck up all your client data. That client, you can ask them if they'd like to, you know, allow you to see their data, so you have to get permission. But that enterprise interface, which I can show you if you like, really recommend you collect data for 2 weeks before you start the coaching. So get a nice baseline on this individual, both their immersion and their psychological safety. So think of immersion as again, that adult measure of thriving. They're connecting to you because they're not thriving in some sense, personally, professionally, or both. So let's get that baseline. And then as Claire said, excuse me, during coaching, I want to make sure that I'm really connecting to that individual. So high immersion and that they feel psychologically safe, and then follow them for weeks or months afterwards. And then show like, oh, here's where you were. And then after coaching, now your immersion's gone up, your average immersion
Right.
on a daily basis has gone up 42%. So you're objectively thriving better. And again, the key here is to move away from self-report, which is biased because people want to be nice or they don't really know. And, neural firing rates are very comparable across individuals. We move the baseline, and this is all changed from baseline. And if your brain's investing more metabolic energy at work, you're thriving, you're digging it. Your brain's getting value from this, and you're going to perform better, your productivity will be higher, and your job satisfaction will be higher.
All right, I'm going to dive in with one question from Frederick. How can this be helpful in comparing what people feel and what they're conscious, intentional about? I'm thinking at an individual level. So how can this be helpful in comparing what people feel and what they're conscious and intentional about? I think maybe we've answered that question already. Does it still?
No, I think that is a great question. And thanks
Yeah.
for letting me just pick on you. I had to pick on somebody, and you were nice. Yeah, so in the father of modern psychology, William James, differentiated between feelings and emotions. So feelings, which has been confirmed, feelings are our conscious appraisal of what's going on, and our emotions are our physiologic response. So that emotional response precedes the conscious report of those feelings. What the app does is when you have a particularly high peak immersion moment or particularly low moment, which I call frustration, like you're here, but you're just not digging what's going on, it'll actually ask you to report what's going on. It also links to your calendar, so you can start building sort of a grid of what really gives you value in life and what doesn't. So if every time I meet with, I'm going to pick on somebody else, every time I meet with Paul King, terrible meeting, right? So the app will tell me like, hey, next hour you're meeting with Paul King, you might want to take a walk before that meeting or meditate for 5 minutes, or right, you begin to prepare you because it's linked to your calendar. And then it says, oh, your next meeting is with Nicole Freeman. Those meetings with Nicole are always great. Skip the coffee. You're going to have an amazing time. And so now I can begin to proactively begin to curate my life for better happiness. So if I just focus on feelings, then I have to say, well, what do I like having a meeting with Frederick or with Nicole, or, it's complicated. So by just getting to the source, we cut out that self-report. Having said that, I think it's a good idea to be aware, to be consciously aware of what that feeling state is. It's just not as predictive of behavior as is the physiologic measure of emotions. So thanks, Frederick. Really good question. I wanted to try to answer it fully.
And another good one from Frederick was about the levels of uncertainty and the effect on oxytocin. And my understanding is that up to a certain level, depending on the context, cortisol rising, if you're seeing someone drowning, I think there's a in the moral molecule there's a story about that Paul dived in and saved a young boy because it was an uncertain situation, but his cortisol wasn't so high that he became unable to contribute to the situation. Right. But there is, if we're very very stressed, life-threatening, it's unlikely to pick up on social cues of others. There's a certain point at which cortisol wipes out that kind of pro-social behavior.
Cortisol is even too slow. So these physiologic stress responses, moderate, increases oxytocin release. Now I have a reason. I'm going to go meet with Frederick. So I got to walk over there. So that's actually better for oxytocin release than just sitting on the couch doing nothing. So yeah, you're right, Frederick. So again, it's that inverted U curve we see everywhere in biology. The technical term for that is the Yerkes-Dodson law. You can look it up later. But everything has that inverted U curve. So moderate stress, arousal, good for oxytocin release. Too much, not good. Too little, no good. Too little is I'll pick on Paul King because he's so nice. Paul King's brother-in-law, who sits on the couch playing video games all day, that guy's under-aroused. He's got to get out and get a life and go, interact with humans. So that's not good either, to just, do nothing.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's where physical intelligence comes in, by the way. And that's why I really, Claire, what you're doing, Kevin, like the body, the brain's embodied. Let's just not forget we're not living in a jar. We have to be out there. We have to be doing things, right? So it's super important. And the more we can do that, the healthier we're going to be physically, emotionally, spiritually, maybe.
Yeah. Very good. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us. We're on the half hour. It's time to bring this session to a close. Listen, we've got some great new faces here in the Institute, and I know a lot of people wanted to be here, and we were expecting over 60 people, so people will be watching this in catch up. So hello to everyone if you're joining us on catch up. If you want to join a share group, if you get the app, want to join a share group, please reach out to me directly, claire@physicalintelligenceinstitute.com. And I will say that very occasionally my app sort of stops, and I just need to reload it. So I'm in support of this incredible technology. I think it's brilliant, and I know, as with anything, it's working on it. So it's early days, I guess, for the absolute sort of, it all working all of the time. But it's really, really, really worth persevering with. So I hope you don't mind me saying that, Paul, but occasionally mine crashes and I just have to reload. So just take it off and reload it again. Yeah,
version 1 will be deleted in September. Version 2, it'll be really great. So there's nothing like getting feedback from paying customers on how crappy your technology is, so you can make it better.
It's definitely not crappy. Listen, thank you so much. So we'll close the session there. We can feel free to follow Paul's work, of course, and listen. Thank you. Great way to spend an hour.